I'd like to start by thanking the grace of heaven, virtues of masters, grand predecessor, transmitters, lecturers, and all of you for giving me the opportunity to share this class today. The class is True Heart and Human Heart. So there are three kinds of hearts. True heart, which is characterized by pure goodness with no evil. The human heart, which has good and evil. And the flesh and blood heart. It's characterized as pure evil with no goodness. So what we want to do is store the true heart and eliminate the human heart and the flesh and blood heart. So we're only going to focus today's class on the first two hearts, the true heart and the human heart. This third heart, the flesh and blood heart, we're not going to talk about because the beings that have this flesh and blood heart are not even qualified to receive the Tao. And since all of us are cultivators and already received the Tao, this flesh and blood heart should not apply to us, right? So we are just going to talk about the true heart and the human heart today. So what is the human heart? So Holy Teacher explains it like this. If we use the human heart to ask ourselves, the human heart would say, "Ugh, I'm so mad," right? Why do we feel others upset us and make us mad? Why do we feel others upset us? It's because we feel we've suffered a loss, because we feel that some right of ours has been taken away. So we feel like the other person owes us something, right? So that's why the feeling of hatred comes up, and that is the human heart. Right? So when we get mad, we feel the other person is very annoying and they're so wrong. That feeling, that's the human heart. Okay, so we get so mad so easily and we can't let it go. But if we really put things into perspective, and it's usually not that big of a deal. And sometimes even over time, we don't even remember why we were mad. Okay, so on the flip side, Buddhas, they have the true heart, not the human heart, right? So they're so forgiving that this wouldn't even apply to them. So most of us, we're still human and we still have that human heart, but we need to work towards moving to the true heart. So people inevitably have some human heart, but what characterizes the human heart? First, Holy Teacher says people often dislike hearing criticism about themselves, yet allow themselves to criticize others, allow themselves to speak ill of them and to spread gossip. So it's really easy to talk about other people, and it's much harder to self-reflect, on ourselves. And another characterization of the human heart, people often unconsciously develop a sense of comparison, leading to many troubles and causing themselves to suffer. So people like to compare with others what they have, what I don't have. Why did that person get a promotion? Why does that person get to have nice cars and nice things? I feel like those things should be mine. Okay, so thinking like that can cause a lot of burdens and worries on ourselves unnecessarily. But if we really understand, then we know that, they get those things because it's their fortune, not ours. Another aspect of the human heart is that Holy Teacher says people often say, if there's nothing going on at temple, there's no need to come. So Holy Teacher asks us, are our hearts focused on our jobs, or is it focused on cultivating Tao? This definition may be biased for us all. So biased meaning it's the wrong thinking, okay? So Holy Teacher says, if there's no work arranged, we should come to temple to recharge, rather than only coming because there's work scheduled. This is called self-discipline. So Holy Teacher is saying that we need to manage ourselves properly, right? Have the right mindset. He says people are very contradictory. They feel very uncomfortable when they come to temple and yet feel miserable when they don't come. So why do people feel uncomfortable when they come to the temple? Is it because of the discomfort from sitting here, right? Experiencing backaches and soreness? It's because the mind has a lot of worries. The mind is not settled. He says those people, when they don't come to the temple, but see other people go, those people start to feel an itch in their hearts. And then they think, oh, I should have gone, but I'm suffering at home. So he says humans really are very contradictory. He says, if we want to come, then come. If we don't, then don't. It's that simple and clear. He says cultivating Tao should be simplified, not complicated. Another aspect of the human heart is that people fear losing face. So we need to put down that facade, that mindset, right? Don't harbor a mentality of being unable to lose. When the internal and external virtues are perfect, it shows our talent and our abilities, okay? And he says to overcome oneself is a wise and intelligent disciple. But people often can't overcome themselves because they constantly complain when they're faced with difficult situations. So sometimes we struggle with whatever doesn't feel ideal or perfect in our lives, and we complain, right? That's the default. But if we can let that go and humble ourselves, don't be too proud or afraid to lose face, then we'll be wiser and much happier. The next aspect Holy Teacher describes is when unable to meet demands of others, the heart shrinks and chooses to escape. So why can't we meet the demands of others? Have we self-reflected? Is it because of our own insufficient abilities, or have we not really put in the effort? Have we diligently tried to improve ourselves? So this is saying that we really need to self-reflect and identify where the problem is. Okay, another aspect, when criticized by others, the heart harbors resentment. When others give us corrections, do we take it as advice? So sometimes people give us constructive criticism. It could be at work, it could be at temple, anywhere in our lives. Or maybe transmitters or lecturers are trying to teach us something. You know, we should appreciate them and take that advice. We can take it under advisement, and if we feel they said something that's right, then we should work on improving that, right? Don't just resent any sort of criticism. Take it as a learning opportunity, right? I know it's hard, but it's very important in order to improve ourselves. Another aspect is enjoying showing off and causing jealousy in others. Why does the desire to show off exist? It arises from arrogance, conceit, and pride in oneself. And only through humility can it be transformed. And jealousy can only be transformed through contentment. Okay, so it's saying that when we're humble, then we can get rid of pride and arrogance, okay, that ego. And when we're grateful and we're content, then we're happy with ourselves and our own lives. We won't feel jealous. Okay. So Holy Teacher says these points mentioned are aspects of the human heart. When our thoughts deviate, we must really reflect on them. When we point our fingers at others, first think about ourselves. Those who can genuinely face their mistakes, they are brave. And those who truly fix their faults, they are wise. So we want to spend less time looking at others and spend more time reflecting on ourselves. All right, so we don't want to be too proud to face our own mistakes and our own faults. And as long as we're willing to improve ourselves, that takes the most courage. So another Buddha said, if we find this displeasing, that displeasing too, we find fault with everything. It's not that others are at fault, but rather our own heart has issues or is unwell. So therefore, what needs adjustment is us, not others. Okay, so again, we need to stop pointing our fingers at others and really look inwards to ourselves. So in temple, there are 3 types of people at 3 different stages. So here, Holy Teacher's categorizing the true heart and human heart more specifically. So he says that there's the Buddha-minded, which are those with the true heart. There's those that are human-minded and mundane-minded. So those 2 are subcategories of the human heart. And he asked, which type are we? The mundane-minded are those that have many thoughts of greed, anger, and stubbornness. And we know that greed, anger, and stubbornness are the 3 poisons. Those that are human-minded, they have good and evil distinction within them. And the Buddha-minded are those with no differentiation between good and evil. The Buddha-minded is the heavenly mind, a cultivating and propagating Tao mind. Okay. So there are many steps between these 3, and we must climb step by step. From mundane-minded to human-minded, and then from human-minded to Buddha-minded, right? So Holy Teacher asks us again, which type are we? What stage are we currently stopped at? Right, so we should ask ourselves that and think and self-reflect. Holy Teacher says if we are within the mundane mind, we can't endure staying in temple. Because people order us around at temple, then we go home and complain and grumble. Someone with a mundane mind would say, coming to the temple, those people meddle with me this way and that way. And when they say cultivators should have compassion, but since I've come to temple, they haven't even hosted me properly, not even offering fruit. I eat one meal and they say I came to temple just to eat. See, how rude is that, right? So that's what a mundane-minded person would say. Well, Holy Teacher says, we know that that person, that mundane-minded person, he comes to commit sins. And such a person is just unteachable. He insists on going against us because he's mundane-minded. His mind is especially filled with greed, anger, and stubbornness. How can anyone teach him? So if heaven and our sweet, sweet Holy Teacher ever labeled us to be in the same category as this type of person, as someone who is just unteachable, that would really hurt, right? That'd be terrible. So he says, unless that mundane-minded person is willing to climb upwards himself. When he's willing to climb upwards, he's going to struggle. But when that struggle reaches human-minded, then he's going to have the distinction between good and evil and knowing what is good and what is evil. And when there's a distinction between good and evil, that mundane-minded person, he's going to keep climbing upwards, accepting the nourishment of Dharma rain, and continues to climb higher. So Dharma rain means the truth, like Tao principles, scriptures, the Buddha nature study class, etc. So when we embrace those things, that Dharma rain, and really put it into practice, then we can move up that ladder. And as that person approaches the Buddha mind, these causes disappear, transcending the self and the ego. Meaning, when we can be like Buddhas, we'll stop planting these seeds of karma, right? Stop the causes of cause and effect. And then we'll be able to go beyond ourself and our ego. So that's our direction, but what kind of person are we, right? So Holy Teacher keeps emphasizing self-reflection. So we really need to ask ourselves these questions and really dig deep during this reflection. And he says that some may have cultivated for 10, 20 years, and we say those people are very compassionate. They ferry many people to the Tao and they do lots of work. But there's still many red marks in their karmic record book. The karmic record book is in heaven and the red marks fill the sky. Okay, so each of us have this karmic record book. That's why we need to be very careful all the time. We can't see it, but it exists. And Buddhas are always observing us and recording everything we do. So we have to be really cautious and thoughtful every day. Because some people feel that those people haven't done much when they come to temple, but do we know all the good deeds they've done outside? Okay. So Holy Teacher is saying that some people look really good from the outside. It seems like they cultivate very well, but heaven sees the truth that they actually have a lot of strikes against them. Or vice versa, a person may seem like they're not truly cultivating, but heaven sees their sincere heart. Okay. So either way, It's, we need to worry less about other people's business and worry more about ourselves. He says, people who are narrow-minded are like this. If they see someone doing better than them, they envy those people and try their best to get rid of them. So even if that person is great at speaking about the Tao, what's the point? He's piling up sins, mistakes, and wrongs. So what about when he becomes a lecturer or a temple host, a staff member, or even a transmitter? It's also pointless. Okay. He says heaven is calculating. We don't realize that our karmic record book is filled with red marks. So waiting until the day we can't pass the test ourselves before asking for help, then it's too late. So here we can really see how heaven judges, right? This person, this mundane-minded person in our example, they just complained at home and sometimes doesn't want to come to temple. So it seems like small sins, but Holy Teacher's saying, that person is unteachable. So it's really scary, right? We don't know how many sins we're accumulating every day. He asked, these past few years, what have we gained from the teachings given to us at temple? Think to ourselves, have we transcended ourself or our ego? Or are we regressing more and more? For instance, we climb to human mind not easily, and the closer we get to the top, the more determined we become, wanting to rise further. But then every time we slip, we fall down. And each time we painstakingly climb up, we end up falling down again. Okay. So as cultivators, we really need to be careful and thoughtful, right? Every detail matters. Don't slide backwards. And we often don't know when we're committing these sins or how much we've done in the past. The Holy Teacher says he sees us all climbing this ladder every day, up and down, as if this ladder's fun. But understand, the day we fall down and can't climb back up, this won't be a joking matter. So he says, how can one transcend the self or the ego? Well, have we realized the Tao? Do we feel that the Tao is truly precious? This kind of preciousness is extremely valuable. It's not easy. Even with all the money, it can't be bought. He says this relates to our life and death, to our descendants and ancestors, to our future fate, a crucial matter of life and death. So how can it be treated as a game or a joke? So no matter how much we possess, when we close our eyes and our legs stretch out, all that's left for others to discuss is whether to bury or cremate us. Nothing is left, only leaving behind a pile of bad debts to be calculated by heaven. So Holy Teacher saying, when we lay down, take our last breath in earth, all that people are going to discuss do with our physical body, right? We can't take anything with us when we leave, nothing physical anyway. So he says, while we're still alive, why not use our mouth to speak more kind words, words of encouragement, words of propagation, and words of compassion and care, right? Use our time on this earth wisely. So we need to know that Tao and calamities aren't solely sent down from heaven. Half of it comes from heaven and the other half is self-inflicted by humans. It's because of the human mind not being righteous, the human mind not being old-fashioned and pure, that leads to natural disasters and human suffering. He says that it's not heaven that lacks compassion. If people did not have greed, how could they cause many man-made disasters? So he reminds us that disciples, we need to act with kindness and have a heart in harmony with heaven. Only then can the world return to peace and tranquility. He says, when one's selfishness accumulates to a point where it can't be transformed, disasters will come. But don't forget, because of disasters, that's why heaven sent the Tao, and the bad hearts causes disasters. So as long as we are willing to transform the human mind with the Tao, then calamities will naturally transform with it. So we need to ask ourselves, what should we really strive for? What should our true mission or goal in this lifetime be? So some say that no one can guarantee the timing of fate. If people's hearts don't change, of course, fate will remain as it is. But if people's hearts can become kinder, become better and better, then the timing of fate is still undetermined, right? So it's constantly changing still then. So he hopes that we can all unify our ever-changing hearts and do everything sincerely. And he says that by not eating vegetarian, it makes it hard to avoid disasters, right? So we talked about this in a previous class. If we continue to eat a lot of meat, then we continue to create a lot of negative karma with these sentient beings. So it makes it harder to escape calamities, right? We want to slowly reduce the bad karma that we're planting, these seeds, and have good affinity with all beings. He says, by not being virtuous, it makes it difficult to escape these disasters. To truly have virtue, we must maintain purity in the body, mind, and spirit. He says, when calamity strikes, we must bear it. It's difficult for those with no virtue to escape. So this next part, Holy Teacher saying, if we want to be like Buddhas, we really need to have a mindset like this, right? Buddhas make these big vows that regular people typically are afraid to make. So let's see what kind of vows. If we bear calamity, then the sins of all sentient beings are my sins. If they cannot return to heaven, the responsibility is mine. Not only do I fulfill my own vows, but I also bear the sins of all beings. All sentient beings return to heaven, and I remain in the mortal realm. So we know all these Buddhas, they make these really big vows, and they're willing to sacrifice themselves in order to save all of us living beings, including animals, right? The beings in hell, all these beings. But normal people were afraid to make vows like this because we typically are a little bit more selfish-minded, right? But if we want to be like Buddhas, we need to be broader and more open-minded and willing to take more on, right? Put in more effort to grow. So in the past, sages have always observed the mind. They observe the mind and they contemplate the mind. They ask themselves, why do I feel troubled? Why do I harbor feelings of jealousy? Why do I have thoughts of duality? Why do I feel unsettled? And why do I feel a sense of rejecting others? So how is it that Buddhas are able to refrain from arising these thoughts? So take our time and think to ourselves. Cultivation is about discussing ethics and virtues. So the Buddha hopes that we'll spend more time exploring this aspect in our study of the Tao, rather than focusing on criticizing others, right? So talking about others, criticizing others, that's not good for us. And we need to think that everything's due to our own faults. If we can control our own mind, then we can attain peace and tranquility. But if we find it very hard to subdue or control our mind, and we feel many duality thoughts arise, we have to remember that those are delusions. It means we haven't fully entered, right? So he says, starting from today, we must let go of those mindsets. We can't not let them go. So repent all thoughts until they are completely pure and calm. And he hopes that we won't wrongly walk the cycle of life and death and do not remain in ignorance. So everything the Buddha just touched on is just the surface. So what we really need to do is just to go and do it, put it into practice. He says, realizing the highest point is when one is the most perfect harmony. When the mind is humble, we can see the Buddha nature. And when the mind is most humble, one can see our own faults everywhere without seeing others, right? Again, the self-reflection. So at that point, we can achieve perfect harmony. And some people, they seek doctors for their physical illnesses, ailments, but they end up on the wrong path. That's why today our Heavenly Tao's hospital, it treats the illness of the heart, starting from the mind. So if we can handle it correctly, we won't fear suffering from illness. So we know that normal doctors, they treat the physical body, right? But no matter what they do, it's always going to be a temporary fix. One day these bodies will deteriorate, disappear. So the Tao is the medicine for our souls, our Buddha nature, and that lasts forever. Okay, so we just talked about human heart. What is the true heart? So we know we have our Buddha nature, and every sentient being has a Buddha nature, which is or the original essence, without any bad habits, desires, etc. It's very pure. And our Buddha nature, or you can say our true heart, naturally encompasses these 5 constants, these virtues. So we are naturally benevolent or kind, naturally righteous and justified. It has all the proprieties and is proper. It has the wisdom and is trustworthy, right? This Buddha nature. So when we see little babies, little kids, we can see how innocent and pure they are, right? They don't judge others by color, by status, or have some sort of differentiating heart. Okay, they don't dislike others or have preconceived notions about anybody else. So we need to return to that state. Okay, we have all of this within us already. We just need to bring it out and reveal it more and more until the Buddha nature becomes the master. So Lecturer Liu from the Buddha Nature Study class, he says, we embody the Tao within our Buddha nature. And when we bring out our Buddha nature, that Buddha nature is the Tao. Acting in accordance with the Buddha nature is called virtue. And continuously doing this without change is called true path. All right, so our Buddha nature and the Tao, they really go hand in hand, are synonymous with virtue and all of that. So our Buddha nature is already within all of us. We just have to reveal it more and more. And Holy Teacher says, people usually have a false heart and a true heart. If one can integrate the false heart into the true heart, it will become the true heart. And typically when we do things, the false heart is trying to compete with the true heart. But if we can change direction and use that true heart well, constantly use the true heart, then the false heart will merge with the true heart and disappear. So this false heart is about earthly things like wanting the promotion, having desires, the material things, right? But our true heart, like we said, is the Buddha nature. So if our Buddha nature is our master, that false heart will fade, right? So the key is really making our Buddha nature the master all the time. And he says to be brave in supporting our true heart. Those who possess a true heart will not be lonely or hurt. Believe in this and we can be saved. So when our Buddha nature is our master and we're very virtuous, we know that Buddhas are always going to be by our side and that others naturally want to be close to us. Okay, so if we believe in that, believe in our Buddha nature and truly, sincerely cultivate, then we have a chance to return to permanent heaven. And although we may encounter trials during the process of cultivation, we must give ourselves a concept. There will always be tests in the path of cultivation. But those with steadfast Tao concepts, we can steadily navigate through every obstacle and trial. So something to keep in mind is that tests tend to get a little harder the more we cultivate, right? So we need to keep going in the temple and really solidify our Tao knowledge so that the things we learn, the wisdom we gain, can help us on our daily lives and help us get through each test that we encounter. Otherwise, if we don't really have a strong Tao foundation, it's really tricky to pass these tests sometimes. So some disciples are unable to understand that it's ourself testing us. Holy Teacher often says it's ourself that binds us. It's not others who trip us, but ourself. Again, so we don't want to blame other people. It's ourself, right? Look. So heaven uses others in various situations to refine our hearts. When things fail, we realize that it's because we didn't put in enough effort. It's my own responsibility that was lacking. So dealing with people and situations provides excellent opportunities for training. So if we can change our mindset from why is life so hard, why is life so unfair, to, okay, so this is a test sent from heaven. I need to be grateful for this opportunity, right? That heaven thinks I'm worthy to be tested, and that this is a chance for refinement or improvement. So just like a diamond needs to be refined, okay? So what do I need to do to pass this hardship and pass this test? So we want to kind of keep that kind of mindset at the forefront of our minds when we're encountering hardships, and instead of complaining about them. And he says, home is a place for cultivation, and the members in the Tao community is also a good place for cultivation. But it depends on whether the disciples are cultivating and practicing with a grateful heart. If we harbor a heart of procrastination and reluctance to progress, even if we're given the best opportunities, we won't cherish them. So it's saying we need to have a grateful heart and appreciate every moment, okay? Even the hard ones. And those truly cultivating are not afraid of hardship. True cultivators can endure real trials. And if the Tao was not true, if the heavenly mandate was not true, after so many storms, the boat would capsize and fall over early. So how could the Tao be spread throughout the world then? It's because there are many people out there who slander the Tao that the preciousness of Tao cultivation is revealed. Okay, so there's always going to be people who are against something like this or against, anything. But because the Tao is true, it's from heaven, doesn't matter what people say, it can't be destroyed, right? We know it's true. And a scripture from God said that the sun and moon shine without partiality. Wherever their light reaches, they equally and impartially shine on all things, without bias or favoritism. So from this, it can be understood that the true heart embodies absolute fairness and is unselfish. So the sun and the moon, they don't say, hey, I like this person better, so I'm going to shine extra on them, and less on this other person I don't like, right? They treat everybody and everything equally. So we need to be like that too, have no differentiating heart, and to be completely unselfish. So what is the true heart? In the scripture, it says, the true heart is the heart of righteousness and generosity. It is the heart of heaven and earth. The Tao of sages lies in the manifestation of bright virtues, and bright virtue is the Buddha nature. And Buddha nature is the true heart. So again, it's very important to find our Buddha nature and really bring it out and use it. And how do we bring it out is by following Lecturer Leo's Buddha nature study class. Holy Teacher in the past has recommended that all his disciples study it and listen to an hour a day. Okay. And then it says, the true heart inherently has no desires. Those with desires do not possess the true heart. Rather, they have human hearts. And the human heart is characterized by greed and selfishness, hence its peril. So originally, the true heart and the human heart were one. A single thought of kindness is the true heart, and a single thought of evil is the human heart. So this really shows true heart and human heart and what's the difference. The human heart is neither inherently good or inherently evil. Its nature depends on influence. So being influenced by the white, and it becomes white. Being influenced by the yellow, and it becomes yellow. So we know that we are influenced by our environments, right? I grew up in a town that emphasized education and careers, wealth. So it was completely unheard of to not graduate high school, to not graduate college. But once I got to college, I realized that other parts in the world, in the US, it wasn't like that at all, right? It's completely normal to not go to college in some places, or to, maybe go to trade school, or just go straight into the workforce, right? So it depends on how we're raised and what we're exposed to. And another example is, we see how people are so different depending on where they're from, right? People on the West Coast are known to be more liberal, more easygoing. The East Coast is known for its hustle and, fast pace. So we can clearly see how we're influenced by the things and the environments around us. So it's reminding us we need to make sure that we surround ourselves with positive energy and positive people, right? People who are going to help us on our cultivation journey and not make cultivating harder. So as long as one starts cultivation from everyday life, practicing amidst the mundane world in our everyday lives, and remains untainted by impurities, then they are true cultivators of the Tao. So in the past, disciples had to cultivate in the mountains, secluded and alone. But now we're super fortunate, right? We can cultivate at home. It's super easy to be able to do it at home. And so it'd be really a shame if we didn't really cultivate. So God's scripture says, the words tonight express the essence of the true heart being profound and the human heart being fickle. So fickle means that the heart changes easily, right? So we can see the difference. The true heart doesn't change, but the human heart's constantly changing. So God hopes that all sons and daughters will cultivate a good awareness, be less selfish and desirous, and devote themselves diligently to the practice of the Tao. Then they can make progress in the Tao. And Holy Teacher said that when we are very benevolent or kind, heaven will give us strength. If we have an arguing heart, then heaven will not let us have an easy life. So Holy Teacher has told us all that cultivating Tao should be happy. And there's not enough time to cultivate and propagate Tao. So how can there be time to strive for power, fame, and wealth? So we really need to ask ourselves, what's our priority, right? Do we want to pursue power, fame, and wealth? Or do we want to pursue something deeper, right? The Tao. And he says, if we work together harmoniously, then naturally there's going to be achievements. If we don't do it, then each passing day brings no progress. So remember that every moment needs to be cherished, and we need to take advantage of every moment. We're on this earth for such a short amount of time in the big picture. It would be a shame if we didn't put in effort in each moment that we can. And so Holy Teacher has spoken about the Happy Buddha Precious Temple will flourish in Tao affairs. So Happy Buddha Precious Temple is talking about specifically the New York Temple, but really all the temples here, right, is under the Happy Buddha Precious Temple. So he said that the Tao affairs will flourish. It just relies on everyone being harmonious. So please learn to speak kindly and find the good. We must do it. Those who do it will be blessed, and those that do not do it will not be blessed. So if we use the true heart to work together, then the temple's going to flourish. But if we use the human heart, then many problems are going to come up. So he says, the more a place flourishes, the less room there is for gossip and nonsense. Why? Because there's no time for it, right? So if we're so busy, spreading the Tao and truly cultivating, we're not going to have time to sit down and, gossip and talk about nonsense. So he says, when we encounter gossip or nonsense, we really need to be alert, right? My Tao affairs, it means that my Tao affairs are not going to flourish anymore, and my heart will not be broad anymore. So when we come across something like gossip or nonsense, someone brings it to our attention, we should try to shut it down, not add oil to the fire and make it a bigger problem than it is, right? And we should tell ourselves, hey, we really need to be vigilant, alert, and turn things around. Okay, so it's our chance to really help the Tao affairs flourish in the temple. So a holy teacher says, why did the teacher help us open the Buddha Nature Study class? It's because the principles need to be thoroughly understood, merits need to be established, Tao needs to be propagated, and our inner virtues need to be cultivated. Okay, so we know that our Buddha nature has all these things, right? It has the principles, it is the Tao, and it has these virtues. So what the key is to really bring that out more and more. So if we can bring it out more and more and use it in our daily lives, then that's how we're going to progress, right? We want to go from human-minded to Buddha-minded. And to do that is to really study and understand the Buddha nature. So holy teacher he reminded us that we need to be, disciples should try to listen to the class an hour a day and practice letting go of all affinities and not letting a single thought arise. So holy teacher is really trying to help us and give us the tools to succeed, but it's up to us to use those tools, okay? So they can't force us to cultivate and force us to self-reflect or to build merits, right? That's up to each of us individually. And it's not like, we can do it for somebody else. It has to be self-motivated, sincere. And once we build those merits and we really understand that Buddha nature and build those virtues, then we have a chance to return to permanent heaven, okay? So Senior Transmitter Jin always likes to remind us that we wouldn't go to somebody's house, our mother's home, empty-handed, right? So same thing, when we return back to permanent heaven, to our heavenly mother, to God, we don't want to show up empty-handed. So we want to be able to present all the merits we've earned and all the virtues we've accumulated. The holy teacher says, if we cannot control the human heart, then the true heart will perish, disappear. If we can control the human heart, then the true heart will manifest or come about. So becoming an immortal, a Buddha, a sage, achieving Buddhahood's not difficult, according to holy teacher. Right? Buddhas originally were ordinary people. The only fear is that the ordinary human heart is not steadfast. Okay, so we have a chance to cultivate and achieve Buddhahood in this one lifetime, this current lifetime. We just have to keep our direction steady and not get distracted by the false things, the false world, the environment around us, right? Keep our Buddha nature, our true heart as our master, and let it always guide us, and don't mistakenly let our human heart become our master, right? So when we're in our daily lives, it's very easy to let that human heart become, the one driving and the one guiding us and leading us, right? So even our six senses, all these things, we see all these things we like, we hear things we like, and we get attracted to them, right? So that's our human heart. We have to remember that our true heart, our Buddha nature, is the one that we want to listen to. And then eventually, if our Buddha nature, our true heart, can be the the main one, the guide, then our human heart will eventually merge with it and disappear and fade, right? So that really hopefully explains the human heart versus the true heart and which one we want to attain, which is the true heart, right? Okay, so that concludes today's class. If I said anything wrong, I ask for heaven's forgiveness and for transmitters to please correct me. Thank you.